Notice how the mind moves tonight. Perhaps it circles the same thought again and again. Perhaps it reaches for the phone, the light, the distraction. Perhaps it tells you that sleep should have come by now, that rest should feel different, that something is wrong with this moment as it is. This is the texture of resistance. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet friction between what is happening and what the mind insists should be happening instead. You can feel it in the body. The jaw holds, the breath shortens, the shoulders rise slightly as if bracing against something. And what are they bracing against? Often, just this. The simple fact of being awake when you wanted to be asleep. The presence of discomfort when you hoped for ease. The arrival of a thought you have already thought 1,000 times. Consider a river for a moment, not as an idea, but as an actual body of water moving through landscape. When the river meets a stone, it does not stop. It does not argue with the stone. It moves around it, over it, through the space that remains. The water continues. But imagine if the river could somehow resist the stone, could push back against its presence, could insist that the stone should not be there. The water would churn. It would foam and thrash. It would exhaust itself against something that was simply there, simply present, simply part of the landscape. This is what the mind does with experience. It meets a sensation, a thought, a feeling, and immediately asks, should this be here? And if the answer is no, resistance begins. The mind pushes, it argues, it replays, it plans escape routes, and in that pushing, suffering multiplies. The Buddha spoke of this with great precision. He did not say that pain causes suffering. He said that craving and clinging cause suffering. Craving for experience to be other than it is. Clinging to the belief that we can force the river to stop meeting stones. Right now, you can notice this directly. You do not need to believe anything. You do not need to accept a teaching. You can simply feel what happens in your own experience when resistance is present. Bring attention to the breath, not to change it, not to deepen it or control it, just to feel it as it moves. And notice if there is resistance even here. Does the mind want the breath to be slower? Does it want the chest to feel more open? Does it want this moment of attention to produce immediate calm? Watch how that wanting creates a small tightness, a small gap between what is and what is desired. That gap is where suffering lives, not in the breath itself, not in the sensation itself, but in the space between reality and the story about how reality should be different. The river moves around the stone because it has no argument with the stone. It does not carry a story about how the riverbed should be smooth. It simply meets what is there and continues. When you notice tension in the shoulders, there is just tension, a sensation, a pattern of holding. But the mind often adds a second layer. It says, this tension is wrong. I should not be tense. I have tried everything and I am still tense. Now there is the tension, and there is also the story about the tension, and there is also the resistance to both. 3 layers where there was only one sensation. This is not about forcing yourself to accept everything. It is not about pretending that pain does not hurt or that difficulty is not difficult. The river does not pretend the stone is not there. It simply does not add resistance to presence. You can hear sounds around you right now. Perhaps the hum of air moving through a vent, perhaps traffic in the distance, perhaps the small creaks of a building settling. These sounds are simply here. The ear receives them. And unless the mind resists them, unless it tells a story about how they should not be here, they pass through awareness like water moving past a stone. But if the mind says, I cannot rest with this noise, I cannot settle until it stops. I need silence to feel peace. Then the sound becomes an enemy. The mind braces against it, the body tightens, and the sound, which was just vibration in air, becomes a source of suffering. Resistance is so ordinary that we barely notice it. It hides in the smallest preferences. in the slight irritation at a wrinkled sheet, in the mental argument with a thought that will not leave, in the disappointment that this moment of listening has not yet produced the deep rest you hope for. And here, right here, is where the practice begins. Not in making resistance go away, but in seeing it clearly, in feeling the difference between the river that flows and the river that fights, in noticing what happens in the body and mind when you meet experience without adding the layer of should or should not. Let the breath be exactly as it is. Let the sounds be exactly as they are. Let even the resistance itself be here, without resisting the resistance. Just this. Just a simple willingness to feel what is present without demanding that it be different first. Something happens. A headache begins. A conversation turns sharp. The body feels heavy or tight or wrong. And before the sensation has even fully arrived, something in you pulls away from it. The shoulders rise, the breath shortens, the mind says no. This is the moment worth noticing, not the pain itself, but what happens next. The clenching, the bracing, the silent argument with what is already here. The Buddha spoke about this often. He said pain is inevitable, but suffering is the mind's refusal to let pain be as it is. The difference between the two is not philosophical. It is something you can feel in your body right now. Pain is the sensation. Suffering is the tightening around it. Think of a finger trap, those woven tubes you might have played with as a child. You slide your fingers in from both ends. When you pull to escape, the trap tightens. The harder you pull, the more it grips. The instinct is to resist, to force your way out. But the only way through is to relax, to move toward the center, not away from it. This is what happens with discomfort. The body meets a sensation it does not want. The mind says this should not be happening, and in that refusal, the original pain becomes wrapped in layers of tension, story, and fear. The ache in your back becomes a catastrophe. The sting of criticism becomes proof of your unworthiness. A moment of loneliness becomes a life sentence. You are not doing this on purpose. It is an old survival pattern. The body learned long ago to brace against threat. But now the bracing happens even when there is no danger. It happens with boredom, with sadness, with the ordinary discomforts of being alive. And the bracing itself becomes a second pain. You can begin to see this, not by fixing it, not by forcing yourself to relax, but by noticing it when it happens. Today, just once, notice the moment when you brace. It might be physical. Your jaw tightens when someone speaks to you in a certain tone. Your chest contracts when you open an email. Your hands grip the steering wheel when traffic slows. Or it might be mental, a thought you push away, a feeling you try to outrun, a silence you fill because stillness feels too raw. When you notice it, name it silently, just one word: resisting, not as judgment, not as failure, just as recognition. Oh, this is what resisting feels like. The naming itself creates a small gap, a breath of space between the pain and the reaction to the pain. In that gap, you might feel something shift. Not the discomfort going away, but the tightness around it, loosening slightly. You are not trying to like the pain. You are not pretending it is not there. You are simply letting it be what it is. A sensation, a thought, a wave moving through. The finger trap releases when you stop pulling. The suffering eases when you stop insisting that this moment be different than it is. This does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you stop caring or stop responding to what needs attention. It means you meet the moment without adding the weight of refusal to it. Pain, when it is just pain, has a shape. It has a beginning and a middle and an end. It moves, it changes. But when you wrap resistance around it, it becomes solid, fixed, a thing you must carry everywhere. You can feel the difference, the ache in your knee when you simply notice it. And the ache in your knee when you also carry the story that your body is failing, that you are getting old, that this will only get worse. One is a sensation. The other is a world of suffering built on top of it. Right now, wherever you are, there is something present. Maybe it is comfort. Maybe it is discomfort. Notice what your mind does with it. Does it cling? Does it push away? Does it brace? And if you find the bracing, just name it. Resisting. That is enough. That one moment of seeing clearly is the beginning of freedom. There is a feeling that comes when something unwanted arrives. A tightness in the chest, a sudden wish to be anywhere but here. The thought appears quickly, this should not be happening. It might be anxiety that shows up uninvited on a quiet morning, or anger that flares when someone speaks carelessly, or sadness that settles in without warning. The content changes, but the response is often the same. We push, we argue, we try to make it leave. And the strange thing is, the pushing itself becomes exhausting, more exhausting sometimes than the original feeling. There is an old teaching in Zen that points to this. It says the guest is already inside the house. Locking the door only traps you with them. The guest here is whatever has arrived, the unwanted thought, the difficult emotion, the sensation you did not ask for. It is already present. It has crossed the threshold. And yet we stand at the door, turning the lock again and again, as if that will somehow undo what has already happened. This is not about welcoming suffering. It is not about pretending things are fine when they are not. It is simply noticing what resistance actually does. Resistance does not remove the experience. It adds a second layer, the original feeling, and then the fight against it. The wave, and then the bracing. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean. A wave is coming. You can see it building. You tense your whole body. You lean back. You clench your fists. The wave crashes anyway. It moves through. But now your body is rigid. Your breath is held. The wave has passed, but you are still braced. This is what resistance feels like. The wave crashes whether you brace or not, but the bracing makes you feel the impact twice. Once from the wave, once from your own tension. When something unwanted arises, the instinct is to push it away immediately, to say no with the whole body, to argue with reality, as if arguing could change it. But the feeling is already here, the thought has already appeared. The sensation is already moving through. Resistance does not protect you, it exhausts you. There is another way to meet what arrives. It is quieter. It does not require force. When something unwanted arises, you can whisper very softly, just to yourself, you are here. Not as surrender, not as defeat, just as acknowledgement. You are here. This feeling, this thought, this tightness. You are here. And then, one breath. Just one. In and out. That is all. You are not trying to fix anything. You are not trying to make it stay or make it leave. You are simply naming what is true. The guest is inside. The wave has arrived. And you are breathing. This small act changes something. It shifts the relationship. Instead of two forces colliding, there is just experience happening. The resistance begins to soften. Not because you tried to soften it, but because you stopped treating it. The original feeling may still be uncomfortable. That has not changed. But the second layer, the exhausting layer, begins to thin. You start to notice that resistance itself is a choice, not a conscious one usually, but a pattern, a habit of turning away. And like any habit, it can be seen. And when it is seen clearly, it loses some of its grip. The wave crashes. You feel it. You do not brace. You let your body stay soft. The wave moves through and continues on. You are still standing. This is not about becoming passive. It is about seeing clearly. Resistance is not protection. It is a second wave you create yourself. When you stop creating that second wave, something shifts. The original experience is still there, but it is no longer amplified. It arises, it moves, it fades, and you are breathing through it. You are here. One breath, that is enough. You are standing in the rain, and you are arguing with it. Not out loud, perhaps, but inside there is a voice. It says, this should not be happening. It says, this is wrong. It says, if I resist hard enough, maybe the rain will stop. It does not stop. The rain continues. And now there are two experiences. The rain itself, which is just water falling, and the argument, which is you tightening against what is already here. This is the shape of most of our suffering. Something arises. Pain in the body. A difficult conversation. A plan that falls apart. The mind meets it and immediately says no, not this, not now. This should be different. And that no becomes a second layer. The original experience, and then the refusal of it. The friction between what is and what we insist should be. The early teachings point to this again and again. Suffering is not just the difficult thing. Suffering is what happens when we push against the difficult thing, when we clench around it, when we demand that reality rearrange itself to match our preference. You can feel this in the body. Notice what happens when you say, even silently, this shouldn't be happening. The chest tightens, the jaw sets, the breath becomes shallow. You are bracing against the moment as if you could hold it back with tension. But the moment is already here. Arguing with the rain while standing in it. You can argue all you want. You can list reasons why the rain is inconvenient, unfair, poorly timed. You can shake your fist at the sky. And still, you will be wet. The rain does not hear your argument. It does not care about your reasons. It simply falls. This is not about resignation. It is not about pretending you like the rain. It is about seeing clearly that resistance does not change what is. It only adds a layer of struggle on top of what is already difficult. There is a small practice you can try. It is very simple. When you notice yourself saying, this shouldn't be happening, pause. Feel where that thought lives in the body. Notice the tightness, the heat, the pulling away, and then quietly say something else. This is happening, not as defeat, not as approval, just as fact. This is happening. The pain is here. The disappointment is here. The rain is falling. This is what is true right now. You may feel something shift when you do this. Not always, but sometimes. A small release, a softening. The argument loses its grip because you are no longer feeding it. You are still in the rain. But you are no longer also fighting the rain. This does not make the rain pleasant. It does not solve the problem that brought you outside in the first place. But it removes one layer of suffering, the layer you were adding yourself. And that matters. Because when you stop arguing with what is, you have more energy, more clarity. You can see what is actually needed. Maybe you need shelter. Maybe you need to wait. Maybe you just need to let yourself be wet for a while. But you cannot see any of that while you are busy insisting that the rain should not exist. The teaching is quiet, but it is steady. Craving is the root, not craving for present things only, but craving for things to be other than they are. The mind reaches for what it wants and pushes away what it does not want. And in that reaching and pushing, suffering multiplies. You do not have to believe this, you can just notice it. Watch what happens in a moment of resistance. Watch what happens when you let the resistance go, even for a breath. The rain is still rain, but you are no longer at war with it. And that is enough. You may find yourself exhausted by all this arguing, tired of the endless no, tired of the tightness, tired of demanding that life be different while life continues exactly as it is. That exhaustion is not a failure, it is a doorway. When you are too tired to argue anymore, something else becomes possible. You can simply stand in the rain, you can feel it on your skin. You can notice that you are still here, still breathing, even though this moment is not the one you wanted. You probably know the feeling of holding tension somewhere in your body, the jaw, the shoulders, the belly. You might not even notice it until someone mentions it or until the day is over and you realize you've been clenched for hours. It feels like you're doing something, like you're managing the situation by holding on. But the body doesn't distinguish between holding and hurting, it just knows the grip. The Buddha said that clinging and pushing are two forms of the same grip. At first, that might sound abstract, but if you pay attention, you can feel it. When you want something to stay, you tighten. When you want something to leave, you tighten. The direction is different, but the tension is the same. Resistance feels like control. It feels like if you just hold firm enough, you can keep things from falling apart. Or you can keep the unwanted thing at bay. But what actually happens is that the holding itself becomes the problem. The ache in your hand, the stiffness in your neck, the exhaustion that comes from bracing against what is already here. Think of a fist held tight. If you keep it closed long enough, the hand begins to cramp. The fingers go stiff, the muscles burn. And the strange thing is, even when you know this, even when you feel the pain, it can be hard to let go. Because letting go feels like losing something, like giving up, like allowing the thing you're resisting to win. But the fist isn't protecting you, it's just hurting you. You can try this now if you want. Make a fist with one hand, not a casual fist, a real one. Tight. Squeeze it as hard as you can and hold it there. Keep holding. Feel what happens in the hand. Feel what happens in the forearm, maybe even in the shoulder. Notice if your breath changes. Notice if your face tenses. Hold it for 10 seconds. You can count slowly if that helps. 1, 2, 3. Keep squeezing. 4, 5, 6. Feel the effort it takes. 7, 8, 9, 10. Now let it go. Slowly. Don't just drop it. Let the fingers open gradually, like a flower that's been closed all night. Feel the release move through the hand. Feel the blood return. Feel the warmth. Feel the softness that was there all along, underneath the grip. That softness was always there. You didn't create it by letting go. You just stopped covering it. This is what happens with resistance. The tightness feels necessary. It feels like the only way to stay safe, to stay in control, to keep things from overwhelming you. But the tightness itself is the overwhelm. The body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a held thought. It just responds to the signal you're sending. And if the signal is clench, the body will clench. You can do this again if it helps. Make the fist, hold it, feel the tension build, then release it and feel what softening is like. Not as an idea, as a sensation, as something your hand remembers. The practice isn't about forcing yourself to relax, it's about noticing what holding feels like and noticing what release feels like. Once you know the difference in your hand, you can start to notice it in other places. In your jaw when you're concentrating, in your chest when you're anxious, in your belly when you're bracing for something difficult. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make it go away, you just notice, oh, I'm clenching. And then, if it's possible, you let the fingers open, slowly, without force, just a softening. Sometimes the grip comes back. That's fine, it's not a failure. The body has learned to hold tension as a strategy. It takes time to learn another way. But each time you notice, each time you soften, the body remembers. This is what ease feels like. This is what it's like to stop amplifying the hurt. The fist can open, the breath can move, the body can soften. Not because you've solved anything, not because the difficulty has passed, but because the holding was never helping. It was only ever adding weight. Your hand knows this now. You are sitting in a moment you did not choose, and something in you has gone tight. Maybe it is a conversation you do not want to have. Maybe it is a feeling you hoped would pass by now. Maybe it is just the ordinary weight of the day and you are holding yourself against it without knowing why. Notice where that holding lives. It is not an idea. It is not a thought you can talk yourself out of. It lives in the body, in the breath you did not finish, in the shallowness at the top of your chest, in the way your shoulders have drawn forward as if bracing for impact. This is resistance. And resistance does not make the moment smaller, it makes the suffering larger. There is a teaching that comes from Zen practice, simple and direct. When you stop fighting the breath, you stop fighting the moment. Not because the breath is magic, not because breathing deeply will fix what is difficult, but because the breath shows you in real time how you are meeting what is here. When you resist, the breath becomes shallow, held, partial. You take in just enough air to survive, but not enough to soften. And in that holding, the body believes it is under threat. The nervous system stays on alert. The mind keeps scanning for danger, for exits, for ways to make this moment different than it is. You are spending energy to keep a door shut, not a real door, a door inside you. And you are pressing your whole body against it, certain that if you let go, something unbearable will come through. But what if the door is not keeping danger out? What if it is keeping you locked in? Resistance does not protect you from pain. It traps you with it. It takes the single sharp edge of a difficult moment and turns it into a dull ache that follows you everywhere. Because you cannot run from what you are holding inside your own breath. This is not your fault. The body learned this. Somewhere, at some time, holding became safer than feeling. Bracing became easier than opening. And now it happens without thought, without permission. You meet a moment you do not want, and the breath goes shallow before you even notice. But you can notice, and noticing is not small. 3 times today, just 3, pause and ask yourself, am I holding my breath? Not in a dramatic way, not gasping or choking, just that quiet background holding, the breath that stops halfway, the exhale that never quite finishes. When you find it, do not shame yourself, do not try to fix your whole life in that moment, just let one full exhale go. Let it be slow, let it be complete. Let the air leave your body all the way to the bottom, and then wait. Wait for the next inhale to come on its own. You do not have to believe this will change anything. You do not have to make it meaningful. Just notice what happens in your chest, in your shoulders, in the space behind your eyes when you stop holding for even 3 seconds. Because the breath is the first place you meet the moment. Before thought, before story, before you decide whether this moment is good or bad, wanted or unwanted, the breath is already responding. And if the breath is tight, the whole moment feels tight. If the breath is shallow, the whole moment feels thin and fragile, like it might break you if you let it in fully. But when you let the exhale go, something shifts, not always relief, not always ease, but a small opening, a crack in the door you have been holding shut. You are not trying to feel better, you are trying to feel accurately. To meet what is here without the extra layer of holding, without the added suffering of resistance. The moment might still be hard. The feeling might still be unwanted. But you are no longer spending all your energy keeping it at arm's length. You are letting it be here, and letting yourself be here with it. That is the practice. Not once perfectly, but 3 times today. 3 small moments where you notice the holding and let one breath go all the way through. And in those 3 moments, you might begin to feel the difference between the pain that is actually here and the pain you are adding by refusing it. There is a tightness that comes when something uncomfortable arrives. Maybe it is a feeling in the chest. Maybe it is a thought that keeps circling. Maybe it is a sound you did not choose or a silence you cannot fill. The first movement is almost always the same. You push against it, you want it to leave. This pushing feels necessary, it feels like protection. If you do not resist, you think the discomfort will grow, it will take over. You will lose yourself inside it. But something strange happens when you watch this closely. The pushing itself becomes the problem. The tightness you feel is not only the discomfort, it is also the effort of holding it away. There is a teaching in the Mahayana tradition that points to this. The mountain does not resist the wind, and so the wind passes through. The mountain does not brace, it does not argue with the wind or try to make it stop, it simply remains. And because it remains without resistance, the wind moves on. You can feel this in your own body. Think of a tree in a storm. The tree that resists, that holds itself rigid, is the tree that breaks. The tree that bends, that lets the wind move through its branches, survives. It does not collapse. It does not give up. It simply allows what is already happening to happen. This is not the same as surrender in the way you might fear it. It is not passivity. It is not letting harm continue unchecked. It is something quieter. It is the difference between holding your breath and breathing. Both involve air. Only one involves struggle. When you resist a feeling, you add a second layer. The first layer is the feeling itself. The second layer is the story that the feeling should not be there. That story requires energy. It requires vigilance. It requires you to stay tense, ready to push again the moment the feeling returns. And the feeling does return, because resistance does not make things disappear, it only makes them louder. Equanimity is the quality that sees this. It is not indifference, it is not cold. It is the capacity to be present with what is happening without needing it to be different right now. It is the steadiness of the mountain, the flexibility of the tree. You can test this in a small way. Choose one discomfort, not the largest one, not the one that feels unbearable. Something small, a tightness in your shoulders, a restlessness in your legs, a thought that keeps repeating. For 5 minutes, let it be there. Do not try to fix it. Do not try to understand it. Do not try to make it go away. Just notice it. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice if it changes. Notice if it stays the same. You may feel the urge to move, to shift position, to distract yourself. That urge is resistance. You do not have to act on it. You can notice the urge and stay. What you will likely find is this: the discomfort does not grow the way you feared. It may stay, it may shift, it may even soften, but it does not swallow you. You remain. You are still here. The mountain remains. The wind passes. This is the misunderstanding that amplifies suffering. You believe that resistance is what keeps you safe. But resistance is what keeps you locked in struggle. Presence is not collapse. Presence is the ground that holds you even when the wind blows. You do not have to believe this. You only have to notice it, and you can notice it in 5 minutes, in one breath, in the space between this moment and the next. You have probably noticed that some pain hurts more when you talk about it, not because the words bring back the memory, but because the telling makes the pain more solid, more yours. There is a particular way we speak about our struggles that locks them in place. We say, "I am someone who has always struggled with this," or "this is just how I am." The struggle becomes a fact about who we are. And once it is a fact, letting go feels like losing part of yourself. The early teachers observed this carefully. They saw that the mind clings not only to pleasure, but to its own battles. We hold on to what hurts us, not because we enjoy the pain, but because the story of the pain has become familiar. It has become ours. This is not about blame. It is simply what minds do. They take experience and turn it into identity. They take a moment of resistance and build a self around it. Imagine a scar you keep reopening to prove it was real. You press on it. You show it to others. You describe how it happened, how deep it went, how long it took to heal the first time. And in the telling, you reopen it just a little, not all the way, just enough to feel it again, just enough to confirm the story. This is what we do with resistance. We narrate it. We shape it into something we can hold. And the more we tell the story, the more solid the resistance becomes. There is a difference between describing and defending. When you describe, you are simply noting what is present. The body is tight, the breath is shallow. There is a pulling away. But when you defend, you are building a case. You are explaining why the resistance makes sense, why it is justified, why it has to be there. Both feel like honesty, but only one keeps the door open. You might notice this the next time you tell someone about a difficulty. Listen to the words you choose. Are you naming what happened, or are you reinforcing the identity of someone to whom this kind of thing happens? Are you observing the resistance, or are you proving that the resistance is who you are? This is not about stopping yourself from speaking. It is about noticing the difference. The mind will do what it does. But you can begin to see when the telling hardens the experience into something fixed. When resistance is just resistance, it can move, it can soften, it can fade. But when resistance becomes my resistance, when it becomes part of the story of who you are, it has nowhere to go. You are holding it in place. The teaching of non-self points to this. There is no solid, unchanging self at the center of experience. There are only patterns, habits, stories we repeat until they feel true. And resistance is one of those stories. You do not have to believe this. You can simply watch. Notice when you speak about a struggle and feel how the words land in your body. Do they create space, or do they tighten something? Do they allow movement, or do they build a wall? Sometimes the wall feels safer. It feels like protection. But protection from what? From the possibility that the struggle might change, that it might not define you, that you might be something other than the person who carries this particular pain. The scar does not need to be reopened. It is already real. It already happened. Pressing on it does not make it more true. It only makes it hurt again. You can let the story rest. You can notice resistance without narrating it into an identity. You can feel the tightness in the chest, the heat in the face, the pulling away, and simply let it be what it is. A moment, a sensation, a passing weather. This is not easy. The habit of defending is strong, but you do not have to break the habit all at once. You only have to notice it once, and then again. And in that noticing, something loosens. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped holding it so tightly. You notice something you don't like. Maybe it's a feeling in your chest. Maybe it's a thought that keeps returning. Maybe it's the way someone spoke to you earlier today. And immediately, the mind begins to work on it. It tells you why this shouldn't be happening. It builds a case for why this is unfair, or wrong, or too much. It rehearses what you might say, or what you should have said. It compares this moment to other moments. It reaches for explanations, solutions, ways out. All of this feels necessary. It feels like thinking will solve the problem. But notice what actually happens. The more you think about what you resist, the larger it becomes. The more you argue with it internally, the more solid it feels. What began as a simple sensation or passing thought now has weight, history, momentum. The Zen teachers point to something very simple. In silence, the argument ends before it begins. Not because you've won the argument, not because you've resolved it or let it go in some effortful way, but because without words there is no argument to sustain. Think of a pond on a still day. The water is clear. You can see straight through to the bottom. Then you take a stick and stir the sediment, the water clouds. You stir more, trying to clear it, and it only gets murkier. But if you stop stirring, the pond clears itself. The sediment settles. The water returns to stillness without any effort on your part. Resistance works the same way. The words you use to describe what you don't like, the thoughts you build around it, the stories you tell yourself, these are the stirring. And the more you stir, the more disturbed the water becomes. You might think the problem is the thing you're resisting, but often the suffering is in the resistance itself, in the mental movement toward or away from what's here. Silence doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you stop caring or stop responding to life. It means you stop adding commentary. You stop feeding the inner argument that keeps the disturbance alive. When you sit quietly and something uncomfortable arises, a sensation, a memory, an urge, notice what happens if you don't name it. If you don't label it as good or bad, as something to fix or push away. Just let it be there. Let it move through. Like a cloud passing across the sky. The mind will want to jump in. It will want to explain, to analyze, to make sense of things. That's what minds do. But you don't have to follow every thought the mind offers. You can sit for 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, let whatever arises simply pass without naming it. A tightness in your shoulders. Let it be. A memory of something you said. Let it pass. An itch, a sound, a flicker of worry. Let it move through. You're not trying to empty your mind. You're not trying to feel peaceful. You're just practicing not stirring the water. At first, this might feel strange. The mind is used to its job. It's used to commenting, labeling, managing. But underneath all that activity, there's a stillness that's always been there. You don't create it. You just stop covering it over. 3 minutes. No words, just breath, just body, just this moment, exactly as it is. And when the 3 minutes are done, notice the quality of your mind. Notice if the thing you were resisting feels different. Not because you solved it, but because you stopped arguing with it. The pond clears when you stop stirring it. Silence lets the sediment settle. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix, a heaviness that sits in the shoulders, the jaw, the back of the neck. You wake and it is already there. You move through the day and it follows. This is not the fatigue of effort. This is the fatigue of holding on. The Buddha spoke of suffering as a burden we carry, but he also spoke of a second burden, quieter and harder to see. The first is the weight of what we experience. The second is the weight of refusing to set it down. Imagine carrying a stone in your hand. At first it is only a stone, but as the hours pass, your fingers begin to ache, your wrist tightens, your forearm burns. The stone has not changed. But your refusal to open your hand has turned weight into pain. This is what resistance does. It takes what is already difficult and makes it chronic. It turns a moment of discomfort into a condition. The original pain may have been sharp and brief. The resistance to it becomes dull and endless. You can feel this in your body right now, not as an idea, but as sensation. There is likely one place where you are braced, a place where the muscles have forgotten how to soften. The tightness has been there so long it feels like part of you. But it is not part of you. It is something you are doing. This is the insight that changes everything. Resistance feels like something happening to you. It feels like the world pressing in. But when you bring attention close enough, you see that it is an action, a clenching, a holding, a refusal to let the moment be as it is. The body does not lie about this. It shows you exactly where you are fighting. The tight throat when you swallow words, the locked jaw when you endure, the shallow breath when you brace for impact. These are not accidents, they are strategies, old ones. Strategies that once protected you and now exhaust you. Impermanence is always present. Everything that arises will pass. Pain, discomfort, uncertainty, all of it moves. But resistance tries to stop the movement. It grips the moment and says, not this, not now, not like this. And the moment passes anyway, and the grip remains. So you carry both. The thing itself, which comes and goes, and the refusal, which stays. This is why the tiredness feels so deep. You are not just living your life, you're also holding yourself against it. There is a small practice you can do right now. It does not require belief, it only requires attention. Bring your awareness into your body, not to fix anything, not to relax, just to notice. Scan slowly. The face, the neck, the shoulders, the chest, the belly, the hands. Find one place that feels tight, one place where the muscles are working even though nothing is being lifted. And ask it, what are you holding? Do not answer with your mind. Let the body respond. Sometimes it is a feeling, sometimes it is a memory, sometimes it is just more tightness, and that is enough to know. You do not have to release it. You do not have to do anything. Just see that it is there. See that it is not the world pressing in, it is you pressing back. This seeing is not small. It is the beginning of choice. As long as resistance feels like something happening to you, you are helpless. But when you recognize it as something you are doing, the possibility of stopping becomes real. Not stopping all at once, not forcing the hand to open, just noticing that the hand is closed, noticing that it has been closed for a very long time, noticing that the stone, if you set it down, will simply rest on the ground. It will not chase you. It will not demand to be carried. The fear is that if you stop resisting, you will be overwhelmed, that the pain will flood in, that you will collapse under the weight of what you have been holding back. But resistance does not protect you from the pain, it preserves it. It keeps it alive in your body long after the moment has passed. The clenching itself becomes the suffering. When you stop resisting, you do not open yourself to more pain. You stop creating it. This is not a belief. This is something you can test. Right now, in this body, in this moment, find the tightness. Ask what it is holding and see if, just for one breath, you can let it be there without adding to it. That is all. One breath where you are not fighting what is already here. One breath where the stone is allowed to be heavy without your hand making it heavier. You are not trying to fix yourself, you are simply noticing what you are doing. And in that noticing, the doing begins to soften. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting what will not change. You may know this feeling. The argument that keeps replaying in your mind. The situation you cannot fix. The person who will not see things your way. You push against it again and again, and the pushing itself becomes a second layer of pain. This is not weakness. It is a very human confusion. We believe that if we stop resisting, we are saying yes to what we dislike. We think acceptance means agreement, and so we keep our fists clenched, even when there is nothing left to hold. The early teachings offer a different view. To see clearly is not to condone. It is to stop adding fuel to the fire. When something painful is already present, resistance does not remove it. Resistance wraps around it, tightens, heats up. The original pain remains, and now there is also the pain of fighting. You can test this in small ways. Notice a sound you find irritating. A hum from the refrigerator, traffic outside. For a moment, let yourself resist it. Wish it were different. Feel how that wishing creates a kind of tension in the body, a contraction in the mind. Then, just for a breath, stop wishing. Let the sound be exactly as it is. The sound does not change. But something in you softens. This is not about liking the sound. It is about seeing what resistance does. Think of clouds moving across the sky. You can watch them without needing to change their shape. A dark cloud does not require your approval. A thin, wispy cloud does not need your praise. They drift, they shift, they dissolve. Your watching does not make them good or bad. It simply sees them. This is what the practice asks of us, not to approve of everything, not to become passive, but to stop the automatic fight that exhausts us before we even begin to respond wisely. There is a difference between allowing and surrendering. Surrender suggests giving up, collapsing, letting harm continue unchecked. Allowing is quieter. It says, "This is here. I see it. I do not have to add my resistance to it in order to know it is not what I wanted." When you allow, you create space. In that space you can see more clearly. You can feel what is actually needed. Sometimes what is needed is action. Sometimes it is patience. Sometimes it is simply letting the moment pass. But you cannot see any of this while you are tangled in the fight. The practice is small. Name one thing you dislike. It does not have to be large. A sensation in your body, a thought that keeps returning, a memory, a person's behavior, a fact about your life that will not change today. Say quietly, either aloud or inside, "I see you, and I do not have to fight you." You are not saying it is good. You are not saying you will do nothing. You are simply naming what is here and releasing the clench. Notice what happens in your body when you say this. Does the jaw soften? Do the shoulders drop even slightly? Does the breath move a little more freely? These are not grand transformations, they are signals. The body knows when it is no longer at war. This does not solve the situation. It does not make the difficulty vanish. But it stops the amplification. It stops the cycle where pain creates resistance, and resistance creates more pain, and that pain creates more resistance, on and on. You can return to this again and again. Each time resistance rises, you can notice it, you can name it, you can choose not to feed it. This is not a single decision. It is a practice that unfolds across minutes, hours, days. What you are learning is that you can be present with what you dislike without becoming it. You can see clearly without dressing it. You can allow the cloud to pass without pretending it was never dark. Allowing is not surrender. It is the ground from which wise action grows. There is a kind of pain we carry not because it is heavy, but because we are holding the door shut against it. You know this feeling. Something uncomfortable arises, a tightness in the chest, a wave of shame, a memory you would rather not touch. And immediately, without thinking, you push it away. You distract yourself, you argue with it, you tell yourself it should not be there. And in that moment of pushing, the original discomfort doubles. Now you are not only feeling what you feel, you are also fighting yourself for feeling it. This is resistance. And resistance does not make pain smaller, it makes it louder. We have practiced this pushing away for so long that it has become automatic. The door closes before we even notice. We have trained ourselves over years to turn from our own experience the moment it becomes difficult. And so now, if we want to meet our lives with any kind of ease, we must practice the opposite. We must learn to stop turning away. There is a teaching in the Mahayana tradition that says compassion begins when you stop turning away from your own experience. Not when you fix it, not when you understand it fully, but when you simply stop closing the door. Imagine this. Someone you know has been standing outside your house for a long time. They are cold, they are tired, they have been knocking quietly at first, then louder. And you, inside, have been pretending not to hear. You have turned up the music. You have busied yourself with tasks. You have told yourself that if you just ignore them long enough, they will go away. But they do not go away. They only grow more desperate. And you, inside, grow more tense. The knocking becomes unbearable, not because it is loud, but because you are refusing to answer it. This is what we do with our own pain. When discomfort arises, grief, fear, loneliness, anger, we treat it as an intruder. We believe that if we let it in, it will take over. We believe that opening the door means surrendering to suffering. And so we keep it outside. We keep ourselves divided. But the pain is not an intruder. It is part of your own experience. It is you knocking. And compassion is the act of opening the door. This does not mean you invite the pain to stay forever. It does not mean you drown in it. It means you stop pretending it is not there. You stop adding the second layer of suffering, the suffering that comes from resisting what is already present. You can begin this practice very simply. The next time discomfort arises, tightness, sadness, restlessness, whatever form it takes, do not turn away. Do not try to solve it or reason with it. Instead, place one hand on your chest. Feel the warmth of your own hand. And say quietly, either aloud or inside, I am here with you. That is all. You are not fixing anything. You are not making a promise that the pain will disappear. You are simply acknowledging what is present. You are opening the door. The hand on your chest is an anchor. It reminds you that you are not the pain. You are the one capable of meeting it. The words, I am here with you, are not magic. They are an act of presence. They are the opposite of turning away. At first, this may feel strange. You may feel nothing. You may feel resistance to the practice itself. That is fine. Resistance is also something you can meet. Place your hand on your chest and say, I am here with you, even to the resistance. What you are learning is not a technique. You are learning to stop abandoning yourself. When you stop turning away, something shifts. The pain does not necessarily vanish, but it softens, it loses its urgency. Because it is no longer being pushed against, it is being met. And in that meeting, there is warmth. Not the warmth of comfort, but the warmth of being with yourself, fully, without division. The warmth of no longer holding the door shut. This is compassion, not as an idea, not as something you perform for others, but as the simple, quiet act of staying present with your own experience. You place your hand on your chest. You feel the rise and fall of your breath. You say, I am here with you. And the knocking stops, not because the pain has left, but because you have finally opened the door. You wake up and already the mind is moving. What needs to happen today? What didn't happen yesterday? The small ache in your shoulder. The conversation you wish you'd handled differently. Before your feet touch the floor, you're already somewhere else. This is the pattern. The mind reaches. It grasps at the next moment as if this one isn't enough. As if peace lives in some future arrangement of things. You finish one task and immediately scan for the next. You solve one problem and the mind finds another. Even rest becomes a project. Even silence becomes something to achieve. And underneath all this reaching, there's a quiet exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from doing too much, but from never arriving. From treating each moment as a doorway to somewhere better instead of the only place you actually are. Resistance lives in this gap, between what is and what you think should be. Between the breath you're taking and the breath you wish were deeper. Between the body you have and the body you imagine you need. The mind says, not this, not yet, not enough. And suffering follows that voice like a shadow. There's an old teaching that says, when you stop seeking, you find you were never lost, not as philosophy, as direct experience. The lostness itself is made of seeking. The moment you stop trying to get somewhere, the question of where you are dissolves. Picture a bird in flight. Wings beating, body angled forward, moving through air with effort and direction. Then something shifts. The bird stops flapping. It simply spreads its wings and glides. The air that seemed like resistance becomes support. The body that was working so hard finds it can rest and still move, still be held. You are that bird, right now. The air is already holding you, but the mind keeps flapping. Keeps insisting that safety lives in the next moment, the next breath, the next shift in circumstance. And that insistence is the very thing that makes this moment feel insufficient. Resistance doesn't protect you. It amplifies the very thing you're trying to escape. When you resist pain, the pain tightens. When you resist uncertainty, the uncertainty grows louder. When you resist this moment, you create a second layer of suffering on top of whatever is already here. The original experience and then the war against it. Equanimity is not indifference, it's not giving up or checking out. It's the quiet recognition that you can meet what's here without adding the weight of resistance. You can feel what you feel without needing it to be different. You can rest in the middle of things without waiting for them to resolve. The practice is almost too simple. Lie down, on your bed, on the floor, wherever your body can be supported, and for 5 minutes do nothing but feel the surface beneath you. Not as a relaxation technique, not to fix anything or get anywhere, just to notice what it's like when you stop reaching. Feel where your shoulders touch, where your hips rest, the back of your head, your heels. Let the surface hold you without helping it, without improving your position or adjusting toward comfort. Just this. Just the simple fact of contact, of weight meeting support. The mind will move. It will offer thoughts, plans, judgments, itches. Let it. You're not trying to stop the mind, you're just not following it. You're staying with the body, with the quiet fact of lying down, of being held. When you notice you've drifted into thought, that noticing itself is enough. You don't need to scold yourself back. Just feel the surface again, the shoulder blade, the lower back, the places where you meet the ground. This is what it means to stop seeking. Not as a grand spiritual achievement, just as 5 minutes of letting yourself be exactly where you are, of meeting this moment without trying to trade it for the next one. And in that stopping, something reveals itself. Not as insight you can hold or explain, just as a quiet shift. The air that seemed like resistance becomes support. The moment that seemed insufficient becomes enough. You were never lost. You were here all along. There is nothing left to prove here. The teaching has already spoken. What remains is simply this, the willingness to meet what comes without bracing against it. You will forget. That is part of the path. You will find yourself tightening again around a thought, a feeling, a story about how things should be. You will notice the old habit of pushing or pulling, and for a moment you may feel discouraged. But even that discouragement is just another wave. It arrives, it moves through, and if you let it, it passes. This is not about getting it right. It is about seeing clearly again and again what happens when we resist and what happens when we allow. The seeing itself is the practice. The returning itself is the path. Impermanence is not something to fear. It is the texture of everything. The breath that rises will fall. The sensation that feels unbearable will shift. The mood that seems permanent will dissolve like morning fog. When we stop fighting this truth, something softens. Not because we have given up, but because we have stopped insisting that life be other than it is. There is a tenderness in this, a quiet kindness toward yourself and toward the world. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to transcend your humanity. You only need to stop adding the second arrow, the one you shoot at yourself when the first arrow has already landed. The body knows this. It has always known. When you place your attention on the breath, on the rise and fall of the chest, on the coolness of air at the nostrils, the body does not argue. It simply breathes. It does not ask whether it is doing it right. It does not wonder if it should be different. It is here, doing what it does, and that is enough. You can return to that simplicity any time. In the middle of a conversation, in the middle of worry, in the middle of joy. The breath is always available, the body is always here, and in that returning there is a kind of homecoming. Suffering does not disappear because you stop resisting. Pain will still come, loss will still come, uncertainty will still come. But the amplification, the spinning, the endless layering of story upon story that can quiet. And in that quieting there is space. Space to feel what you feel without drowning in it. Space to see what is actually here, rather than what you fear might be here. This is the gift of the practice. Not perfection, not immunity, just a little more room to breathe. If you find yourself returning to these ideas again and again, that is not a failure. That is the practice itself. We do not learn this once and move on. We learn it over and over, each time with a little more softness, a little more trust. The path is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You return to the same lessons, but each time you are different. Each time you see a little more clearly. So let yourself return. Let yourself begin again, as many times as needed. There is no rush. There is no deadline. The practice is here whenever you are ready to meet it. And when you are not ready, that is fine too. Life will bring you back. It always does. The friction will arise again, and you will have another chance to notice, to soften, to allow. This is the generosity of impermanence. Nothing is final. Every moment is a new beginning. You might carry one thing from this time together. Maybe it is the image of the hand opening. Maybe it is the feeling of the breath. Maybe it is simply the reminder that resistance is optional. Whatever it is, let it be light. Let it be something you can return to without effort, without force. There is no need to hold on tightly. The teachings are not going anywhere. They are woven into the fabric of experience itself. You will meet them again in 100 different forms for as long as you are alive. For now, there is just this. The quiet that follows. The space that opens when the words stop. You can rest here for as long as you like. And when you are ready, you can continue. There are other threads to follow, other ways to meet this practice, but there is no hurry. The path is patient. It will wait. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your willingness to sit with these ideas, to let them move through you without grasping. That itself is the practice. That itself is enough.